Hi everybody, we are on section 3 intertidal zones. So what are we going to review today? What conditions must organisms in the rocky intertidal zone tolerate? What are the major types of coastal wetlands? Our key is estuary. Okay, imagine that your home has no walls or roof. Twice a day, a huge storm passes through, bringing a drenching downpour and winds so strong you can hardly keep your balance. At other times, the sun beats down, heating you and leaving you dry. This is what life is like for organisms that live on rocky shores where the land meets the sea. Rocky shores. A rocky shore is one type of habitat found in the intertidal zone. You read about sandy shores, another type, in section 2. Organisms that live in the rocky intertidal zone must be able to tolerate the pounding of the waves and changes in both salinity and temperature. They must also withstand periods of being underwater and periods of being exposed to the air. They must avoid drying out, hiding from predators, and finding food in this harsh setting. Luckily, they are well suited to do these tasks. Along the rocks. Rocky shores are found along much of both coasts of the United States. Figure 9 shows some of the colorful organisms that typically live along the California coast. The highest rocks above the highest high tide line make up the spray zone. The spray zone is never completely covered with water, but it gets wet as the waves break against the rocks. A strip of black algae indicates the highest high tide line. The rocks below this level are covered with barnacles. Barnacles can close up their hard shells. This action traps a drop of water inside to carry the barnacles through the day period until the next high tide, the dry period until the next high tide. The rocks are also home to flat animals called limpets. Limpets have a large muscular foot that allows them to hold tightly to the rocks. They release drops of mucus around the edges of the shell. The mucus forms a tight seal. Okay, here's a rocky shore. The constant changing water levels along a rocky shore in the intertidal zone creates different habitats. Okay, let's zoom in here. Okay, let's move over here. Okay, so we have the rock line. We have this black algae line. This is the highest high tide. We have the barnacles. They're like little clamshells. We have periwinkle. We have rockweed. This is our lowest high tide. Where we have the mussels and the chitons here. And then we have, so this was the lowest high tide. This is the lowest low tide. So you can see we have the sea star, we have the limpets, we have the hermit crab. We have all these that are here, the sea anemone, that are all kind of in this harsh intertidal zone. Okay. So, the tide pools. When the tide goes out, some water remains in depressions along the rocks called tide pools. As the water in a tide pool is warmed by the sun, the water begins to evaporate. The remaining water becomes saltier. If it rains, however, the salinity quickly decreases. Organisms in the tide pool must be able to withstand these changes in temperature and salinity. Tide pool organisms must also withstand the force of waves when the tide comes in and out and again. Sea stars clinging to the rocks with rows of tiny suction cups. Spiny sea urchins crawl slowly along the bottom of the tide pool. If the bottom is sandy, a sea urchin can use its spines to dig a hole. The sea urchin buries itself in the hole during heavy surf. Under shady rock ledges, sponges and sea anemones wait for the incoming tide to bring a fresh supply of plankton and other food particles. Most sea anemones look delicate. However, some sea anemones can survive out of water for more than 2 weeks. When out of the water, the anemone pulls its tentacles inside and folds up into a round blob. Where river meets ocean. Other important environments along the oceans are estuaries. Estuaries are coastal inlets or bays where fresh water from rivers mix with the salty ocean water. Water is partially salty and partially fresh. It's called brackish. Okay, so brackish is when it's partially salt and partially fresh. Coast wetlands. Wetlands are found in and around estuaries. Along the coast of the United States, most wetlands are either mangrove forests or salt marshes. Mangrove forests are found in southern Florida along the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. Salt marshes are especially abundant along the east coast from Massachusetts to Florida. Mangrove forests. Mangroves are short, gnarled trees that grow well in brackish water. The trees fringe the coastline of southern Florida. The mangroves' prop roots show and can anchor the trees to the land. Mangroves can withstand all but the strongest hurricane winds. The mangroves break the action of the winds and waves, protecting the coastline from storms. The prop roots also trap sediments from the land. They create a protected nursery rich in nutrients for many young animals. Okay, salt marshes. A salt marsh is a smelly mud. The mud is made up of sediments, animals, and plant matter and nutrients carried into the marsh by fresh water tides. Cordgrass is the most common plant in the marshes. Unlike most plants, cordgrass can survive in salt water. The plant releases salt through its small openings in the long, narrow leaves. The cordgrass is eaten by animals. The rest of the cordgrass is decomposed by bacteria and fungi in the water. The decomposed material supplies nutrients to the marsh organisms. Okay, let's see if we can look at this. Let's see if I can maybe enlarge this a little bit. Maybe, I don't know if I can or not. So that you guys can actually see. Let's see. Let me see if I can pull this over. Here we go. Well, let's see. Well, look. Okay, so we can see that we have all these different things. I don't know if we can actually see that or not. Okay, well, let's go on. Tidal channels run through the cordgrass waves, break up as they enter the channel, so the organisms in the marsh are protected from the surf. Within the marsh, fish, crabs, shrimp, and oysters hatch and feed before entering the harsher ocean environment offshore. As the tide retreats, mud flats are Mud flats are exposed, many crabs searching for food in the rich mud. Herons, stilts, and egrets stalk across the mud to prey on the crabs and other benthos exposed by the low tide. Protecting the estuaries. The rivers that flow into estuaries can carry harmful substances. Pollutants such as pesticides, sewage, and industrial waste may end up in the estuary. Organisms that live in the estuary are affected by these pollutants. For example, Chesapeake Bay is a huge estuary located in the mid-Atlantic coast. It has been a rich source of oysters, clams, and blue crabs. However, pollutants from inland sources accumulated in the bay for years. Polluting along with overfishing greatly reduced the number of blue crabs in the Chesapeake Bay. When people realized the threat to the estuary, they took an action. Laws were passed to regulate the water quality of rivers that emptied into the Chesapeake Bay. Cleanup efforts have reduced much of the pollution in the bay. Today, pollution is less of a problem in the Chesapeake Bay than it once was. Okay, your homework for today is the Section 3 assessment. I will see you again tomorrow. Bye.